What if I told you that Allah, in His infinite mercy, gave us a way to still earn the reward of night worship, even when our eyes are heavy and our bodies are exhausted? What if missing Tahajjud doesn't mean you've missed everything? Tonight, don't scroll away, because this reminder might change how you see Allah's mercy forever. Allah's mercy is not something distant, rare, or reserved only for the strongest believers. It is vast, constant, and deeply aware of human weakness. Allah created the human being, and because He created us, He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows the limits of our bodies, the weight of our responsibilities, the exhaustion that settles into our bones after long days, and the battles we fight silently in our minds. When a servant struggles to wake up for Tahajjud, it is not hidden from Allah. The heavy eyelids, the alarm that was silenced unconsciously, the intention that was sincere but the body that failed, all of it is already known, and this is exactly where Allah's mercy manifests itself most beautifully, not in ignoring weakness, but in embracing it. Human weakness is not a flaw in the design of Islam, it is part of the design of humanity. Allah did not create angels and demand from them the struggles of humans, nor did He create humans and demand from them the perfection of angels. He created us dependent, forgetful, tired, and in need, and then He surrounded us with mercy. Every obligation in Islam is balanced with ease, every command paired with compassion. When Allah legislated worship, He did not ignore fatigue, illness, stress, or emotional burden. Instead, He opened doors. If you cannot stand, then sit. If you cannot sit, then lie down. If you cannot fast, then make it up later. If you cannot wake up consistently at night, then remember Him before you sleep. This is not lowering the standard of worship. This is the mercy of the one who understands His servants. Allah's mercy over human weakness is also seen in how He rewards intention. A believer may fall asleep before completing what they intended, yet Allah records the intention as a full act of worship. A servant may desire closeness to Allah but stumble repeatedly, and Allah still draws them nearer because of their sincerity. Weakness does not disqualify a believer from Allah's love. Arrogance does. A broken heart that turns back to Allah is more beloved than a body that stands long hours without humility. This mercy removes despair and replaces it with hope, allowing the believer to keep returning instead of giving up, to keep trying instead of feeling rejected, to keep believing that Allah's door is never closed simply because the servant is weak. The Qur'an was never revealed to weigh people down or to make faith feel heavy upon the soul. It came as guidance, as healing, as light, and above all, as mercy. Allah Himself declares that He did not send the Qur'an to cause distress, and this statement alone reshapes how a believer should approach their relationship with it. The Qur'an does not demand from people what they cannot carry, nor does it push them into despair when they fall short. Instead, it meets the believer exactly where they are, in their weakness, their confusion, their exhaustion, and gently lifts them forward. Every verse carries wisdom that acknowledges human limitation while pointing toward divine compassion, making the Qur'an a source of comfort rather than pressure. When the Qur'an is understood properly, it becomes clear that its commands are not chains, but pathways. Allah does not overwhelm His servants with impossible expectations. He guides them step by step. The Qur'an speaks to different states of people, the strong and the struggling, the consistent and the wavering, the hopeful and the fearful. It does not shame a believer for not being at their highest spiritual level at all times. Instead, it repeatedly opens doors of return, forgiveness, and renewal. Even when the Qur'an warns, it does so to protect, not to crush. Its reminders are meant to awaken the heart, not burden it with guilt that paralyzes action. A believer who feels heavy after reading the Qur'an has not encountered harshness, but responsibility wrapped in mercy. The ease of the Qur'an is also reflected in its flexibility within worship. Allah allows recitation in different lengths, at different times, in different circumstances. A person overwhelmed by life can still open the Qur'an and take a single verse, and that verse can be enough to steady their heart. Another may recite long portions in the stillness of the night, while someone else whispers a short surah before sleep. Over time, these small acts accumulate, becoming a steady stream of worship rather than a rare surge followed by long gaps. Allah's mercy allows a believer to draw near through what they can manage, not what exhausts them, ensuring that worship remains a source of peace rather than pressure, and that closeness to Allah is built through honesty rather than display. Night worship is one of the most honored forms of devotion, but it is important to understand that it exists in levels, not a single standard that every believer must reach. Islam does not view closeness to Allah as an all-or-nothing journey, especially when it comes to worship at night. While Tahajjud holds a special status, Allah did not restrict the blessings of the night only to those who stand for long hours in prayer. The night itself is a sacred time, and every act of remembrance performed within it carries value according to the capacity, sincerity, and circumstances of the servant. Recognizing these levels protects the believer from despair and allows them to approach night worship with hope rather than fear of falling short. At the highest level is the one who wakes up consistently, leaving comfort behind to stand before Allah in solitude, reciting Qur'an, making long supplications, and pouring out their heart in humility. This level requires discipline, sacrifice, and consistency, and Allah rewards it immensely. But beneath this level are others who also participate in the night in ways suited to them. There are those who wake up occasionally, even if not every night, and Allah still records their effort. There are those who may not wake at all but remember Allah before sleeping, recite Qur'an, make dua, or seek forgiveness. These actions are not replacements born of laziness, but accommodations made by divine mercy for human limitation. Night worship also includes internal acts that are often overlooked. A heart that turns to Allah with regret before sleep, a mind that reflects on Allah's blessings in the quiet of the night, or a tongue that quietly utters words of remembrance while lying down all fall within the spectrum of night devotion. Allah does not only reward physical movement, He rewards awareness, humility, and longing. For some believers, the night becomes a time of tears rather than standing, of whispered du'as rather than long recitations, and Allah receives them with the same care and generosity because the essence of worship lies in turning toward Him. Understanding that night worship has levels encourages growth without guilt. A believer may begin with small acts and gradually rise as their circumstances and strength allow. Islam invites progress, not perfection. Allah does not close the door of reward to those who cannot reach the highest level. He opens multiple doors so that every servant can walk through at least one. The night becomes a space of mercy rather than comparison, where each believer meets Allah at the level they are able, knowing that every sincere effort in the darkness is seen, recorded, and honored by the one who knows what the hearts conceal. Islam is a religion that builds hope rather than trapping believers in guilt. Yet many people struggle with the feeling that they are never doing enough. Guilt, when left unchecked, can quietly turn into despair, and despair distances a person from Allah far more than shortcomings ever could. Allah does not want His servants to approach Him feeling crushed by their failures. He wants them to come with hearts that still believe in His mercy. Hope is what keeps a believer returning, even after repeated mistakes or missed opportunities. Without hope, worship becomes heavy and intimidating, but with hope, even small steps feel meaningful and alive. Allah constantly redirects the believer away from despair and toward optimism. In the Qur'an, He repeatedly reminds His servants not to lose hope in His mercy, regardless of how great their shortcomings may seem. This divine instruction is not given lightly. It addresses the human tendency to internalize failure and assume rejection. Missing acts of worship, falling into inconsistency, or struggling with discipline does not mean a believer is distant from Allah. Guilt may acknowledge a mistake, but hope transforms that acknowledgement into action. It pushes the believer to try again, to repent sincerely, and to believe that Allah is still listening. When guilt dominates the heart, it often leads to withdrawal. A person begins to avoid prayer, remembrance, or learning because they feel unworthy. Hope, on the other hand, keeps the door open. It reminds the believer that Allah's acceptance is not earned by perfection, but by sincerity and return. Every time a servant turns back, even after failing repeatedly, Allah responds with mercy rather than condemnation. This understanding reshapes the relationship between the believer and worship. Instead of seeing worship as a measure of self-worth, it becomes a lifeline, a way back, and a source of comfort. Replacing guilt with hope does not mean ignoring mistakes or lowering standards. It means understanding that Allah's mercy is greater than human weakness. A hopeful believer recognizes their shortcomings, but refuses to believe that those shortcomings define their relationship with Allah. They see every day as a new opportunity, every prayer as a fresh beginning, and every moment of remembrance as a step closer. Hope allows faith to breathe, to grow naturally rather than under pressure. It nurtures consistency by removing fear of failure and replacing it with trust in Allah's compassion, allowing the believer to move forward with humility, resilience, and a heart that remains connected rather than burdened by regret. Islam emphasizes consistency because it understands human nature. Perfection is not sustainable for human beings, but consistency is. Allah did not command His servants to maintain flawless worship every single day. He guided them towards steady, repeatable actions that keep the heart connected over time. A person who aims for perfection often burns out quickly, overwhelmed by expectations they cannot maintain. In contrast, a person who values consistency builds a lifelong relationship with worship, even if their actions appear small. Islam teaches that it is better to do a little regularly than to do a lot occasionally, because consistency reflects sincerity and long-term commitment rather than short-lived enthusiasm. Consistency nurtures faith gradually, allowing it to grow strong roots instead of fragile spikes. When a believer performs small acts of worship daily, those acts become part of their identity rather than a burden on their schedule. A short prayer, a few verses of Qur'an, or brief remembrance done consistently shapes the heart over time. These actions soften the soul, increase awareness of Allah, and create spiritual stability. Perfection, on the other hand, often leads to comparison and disappointment. When a person falls short of their ideal standard, they may feel defeated and abandon worship altogether. Consistency protects against this by setting achievable goals that encourage persistence rather than withdrawal. Allah's love for consistent deeds highlights His mercy toward human limitations. He knows that energy fluctuates, motivation rises and falls, and life circumstances change. By valuing consistency, Allah gives believers permission to be human while still remaining devoted. Missing a day does not erase months of effort, and struggling during certain periods does not cancel sincerity. A believer focused on consistency returns again and again, even after setbacks, because they understand that worship is a journey, not a performance. This mindset builds resilience and keeps the door of closeness to Allah open at all times. Consistency also fosters humility. It removes the need to impress others or to meet unrealistic standards. A consistent believer worships quietly, steadily, and honestly without measuring themselves against others. Their focus shifts from how much they do to why they do it. Over time, these small, repeated acts accumulate into something powerful, shaping character and strengthening faith. Allah rewards this steady devotion because it reflects a heart that remains attached to Him through ease and difficulty, strength and weakness, success and failure, choosing presence over perfection and persistence over intensity. When all of this comes together, a beautiful truth becomes clear. Allah did not design this religion to exhaust the believer, but to carry them gently toward Him. His mercy surrounds human weakness. The Qur'an eases hearts instead of burdening them, and even the smallest sincere deed is given weight and honor. Night worship is not a single unreachable peak, but a path with many levels. each open to those who approach with honesty and effort. Guilt is never meant to trap the soul, hope is meant to lift it, and perfection was never the goal, consistency was. Through all of this, Allah reminds His servants that He is not looking for flawless worshippers, but returning hearts. Hearts that try, stumble, rise again, and